Hi guys, in today's video we're going to make a chess tutorial for beginners. So if you're a beginner and don't know how to play chess yet, this is the video for you. So yeah, today I'm going to teach you how to play chess if you're a beginner and don't know how to play. So let's get started. Alright, so first off, the first thing you need to know about chess is the chessboard should be placed with a white square on the top left corner and also another white square on the bottom right corner, and it has to be placed like this, and a black square in the top right corner and another black square in the bottom left corner, and each square has a name. So the columns are indicated with a letter A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, and the rows each row has the name of a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like that. So for example, this square is F3 because it's in the F column. Because it's in the F column and in the third row, so it's called F3 for that. And for example, also this square is D5 because it's on the D column and on the fifth row, so D5. Alright, let's move on. Alright, so now I'm going to begin by teaching you about all the pieces in chess. So we're gonna start off with the rook. So the rook can move vertically and horizontally, like so. And if the rook, for example, finds a piece of its corresponding color in the way, it cannot go past it, and it stops at the square right before the piece. But if the piece that's in the way is an opponent piece, the rook can capture the opponent piece like so, and by removing it from the board. So yeah. So this rook from D4 can move like this. Like this. So these are all the moves that the rook can do, that this rook in this place can do. So yeah. So now let's move on to the next piece. Alright, so now the next piece you're going to learn about is the knight. So first off, the knight is the only piece that jumps and doesn't, move like any other piece. So for example, so these are all the squares that the knight can move to. The knight does an L movement, so 2 squares away from it and then 1 square next to it. So like this. Something like this. So anyways, these are all the movements that this knight can do. So yeah, the knight can jump over other pieces, whether it's a white piece or a black piece, like so. And also, if for example there's a piece in the way, the knight can no longer move to that square. However, if this pawn was an opponent pawn, the knight would be able to capture it. So yeah. Let's actually drag the knight to the middle of the board to see what exactly it can do. Alright. Wait. So yeah. So these are all the squares that the knight can go to. It can go to any of these squares. And yeah. Now, let's move on to the next piece. Alright, so now the next piece we're going to teach you about is the bishop. So first off, the bishop moves diagonally. So the bishop will be on the same colored square throughout the entire game. So if this bishop right here is on a white square, it will stay on a white square for the rest of the match. And it'll always stay on a white square regardless of where it's gonna go. So yeah, the bishop moves diagonally, like I said, so like this. And yeah, and if there's a piece in the way that's black, this white bishop can capture it. And if there's a white piece in the way of this bishop, it can it can't go past it, just like any other piece. So yeah. So yeah, the bishop can move in any of these squares with the arrow. So yeah, in any square diagonally, like so. Anyways, now let's move on to the next piece. Now we're going to be moving on to the strongest piece in chess, the queen. So the queen moves exactly like a rook and a bishop at the same time. So horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. So as you can see, the white queen covers up all of these squares right here. So yeah, it moves like a bishop and a knight at the same time. Diagonally like a bishop and vertically and horizontally like a rook. Like a bishop and a rook at the same time. I might have actually said knight earlier accidentally. So yeah. As you can see, the queen covers up all of these squares. That's right. So yeah, like I said, the queen, that's what makes the queen the strongest piece in chess. And yeah, so once again, if there's a black piece in one of these squares that the white queen is covering, the white queen can capture that black piece. And if it's a white piece that's in the way, it can't go past it, just like any other piece. Anyways, let's move on to the next piece. Alright, so now the next piece we're going to teach you about is the king. So, the king is the most important piece in chess. The most important piece in chess. So, the queen moves just like the king moves just like the queen, except just by one square. So, the king can move in any of these squares. So, yeah, like I said, the king is the most important piece in chess. So, in fact, the goal of the game is to capture the king, or at least make it so that the king can't go anywhere. So yeah, the king can go in any of these pieces, and so yeah, the goal of the game is to make it make it so that the king can't go anywhere and is being in check. So for example, if we add a black bishop to g2, the king can now only move in these squares. So the reason why the king can't move in these two white squares is because the bishop is guarding those squares. So if the king moves in these two white squares, the bishop will capture him, and it is not a legal move. So yeah, the king is legally not allowed to move to a square that's defended by an opponent piece. So yeah, because as you can see, this bishop is guarding these two squares like so. So the king can't go there because the bishop is guarding those squares. So now the king can only move to these squares. It can move to any of these squares except for these two squares because they're guarded by the bishop. So yeah, and that's how it works. So yeah. So yeah, as you can see, I can only move my king in these, and now that black moves the bishop to f3, and now I'm gonna try to make black check me. If you don't know what that is, well, you're gonna learn it right here. Come on, just check me. Check me. No! Just check me already. It's not that hard. You know what? Alright, so this is the king. and it can move to any of these squares, and I can choose which one to go. So for example, I'm going to go here, and let's see what black's going to do. Come on. I put the computer at level 8, so it would make it easier for them to check me. Come on. It is not hard. So yeah, as you can see, my king is being checked by the white king is being checked by the white rook. So what does this mean? That the rook is attacking the king, and now we need to make it so that the rook does not capture the king at the next move. So yeah, the rook is attacking the king right here, so we have to save him because the king legally cannot be captured. So yeah. So, as you can see, I can only do these moves right here because I can only move to these 4 squares that aren't guarded. Because these 2 squares are guarded by the king, and these 2 are still guarded by the rook. So yeah, my king is in danger and I have to save him. So this is what you call a check. So you have to save the king so that way it doesn't get captured by the rook in the next move. So yeah, if I don't move the king right now, it's going to get captured by the rook in the next move. And I legally cannot do that. I legally can't let my king get captured by the rook. So I have to move in one of these squares. And in this case, I'm going to move here. So yeah. So that was a check. So now let's teach you guys about a checkmate. Alright, so now we're going to teach you about checkmate, which is when the king is being attacked, and wherever it goes, it's going to get captured. So yeah, which is what we call a checkmate, and that's what ends the match. So if I move my king right here to f8, the black king is in check and it has to run away, and it chose to go there. Now, if I move my queen to g7, black king is still being checked, and it went there. And now that I move my rook to h8, that's what you call a checkmate. So what does this mean? That the king is being checked. The king is in check by the rook, and it can't go anywhere because wherever it goes, it's gonna get captured. And do you want to know what? Because, so yeah, if the king goes here, it's gonna get captured by the queen, and if it goes here, it's gonna get captured by the queen, and if it goes here, it's gonna get captured by the queen. If it goes here, by the rook and the queen, and if it goes here, it's gonna get captured by the rook. So in this case, it's checkmate, and and wherever the king goes, it's gonna get captured by either the queen or the rook. So in that case, it's checkmate, and white wins. Alright, so now moving on to the weakest piece in chess, the pawns. The pawns are the weakest pieces in chess. So normally a pawn can move forward by one square and captures a piece diagonally. So the pawn is the only piece that doesn't move in the same way. So yeah, the pawn is the only piece that doesn't capture in the same way that it moves. So normally a pawn moves 1 square forward and it captures diagonally by 1 square forward, like so. So this is how a pawn moves, and usually, and this is how a pawn captures. So by the way, on the first move, a pawn can move 2 squares instead of 1. A pawn can decide. So yeah, since if a pawn is on the first, is doing its first move, it can move by 2 squares instead of just 1. So now, since this pawn is on the starting checker, since this pawn is on the starting square, it can move. It can move either here or here. It can also move by 2 squares. So yeah, I can move this pawn either here or either on e3 and e4. So let's move it, for example, on e4. All right. So now, for example, now that the pawn is no longer on the now that the pawn is no longer on its initial square, it can only move by 1 square forward. So yeah, a pawn can only move by 2. A pawn can only move 2 squares forward if it's on the second row. Second row for white and 7th row for black. So yeah, a pawn can only move 2 squares forward if it's on its second row for white, and the black pawn can only move forward by 2 squares if it's on the 7th row. So yeah, so for example, now that the pawn is no longer on the second row, now that the white pawn is no longer on the second row, it can only move by 1 square. So yeah. So yeah, and a pawn captures like so. So yeah. So yeah, now this pawn has 2 choices. It can either keep going forward or capture this black pawn. In this case, it captures this black pawn and checks the king. So yeah. In this case, this pawn cannot move forward because there's the other pawn in the way. And even this pawn is blocked. So yeah, these 2 pawns are blocked. Well, this white one isn't because it can capture this pawn like so. And now here's the special part about the pawns. Even though it's the weakest piece in chess, once a pawn arrives at the back rank, so when the pawn reaches the other side of the board, it can choose to promote into one of these 4 previous pieces. So it can either promote to a queen, a knight, a rook, and a bishop. So yeah, I recommend you choose the queen since the queen is the strongest piece in chess. So yeah, I can promote into any other piece except for a pawn and the king. So yeah, it's ideal to choose the queen. So yeah, the pawn has just promoted to a queen and is checking the king. And yeah. So yeah, that's how a pawn works. But anyways, that is all of the pieces. So now it's time to move on to some special moves that you can do in chess. So now for the first first special move. Stop interrupting me. You're getting in the way. Okay. So now for the first special move in chess, we're going to teach you about the castle. So what's a castle? So first off, there's 2 types of castles. There's the short castle and the long castle. So the castle happens between the king and the rook, where the rook can protect, where you do this move to protect the king. And wait, let's also make it so that there's pawns. So yeah, you do this move to protect the king from the opponent's pieces. So yeah. So how does the castling work? So yeah, the castling works is that the king. So first off, the castle is the only move where where you move 2 pieces at once, and it's also the only move where the king moves more than 1 square, moves by more than 1 square. It's the only move where the king moves by more than 1 square, and it's also the only move where a piece other than the knight jumps over another piece. So yeah, the castle works is, so now the short castle works that the king moves 2 squares right here, and the rook goes right by the queen, the king right here. So this is how the castle works. So yeah, it's the only case where you can do 2 moves at once. And that's the short castle. So now moving on to the long castle. So yeah, the long castle, king moves by 2 squares to the left, like so. And the rook goes right by the king, right here in D1, like so. So yeah, and also in order to do this castle, you need to make sure that the king and the rook you're going to castle with haven't been moved beforehand. And you should also make sure that you also can't castle if you're in check. And you can't castle if any of these squares where your king and rook are going to end aren't guarded by another piece. So yeah, so that's the castle that you can do to protect your king. So now let's move on to the other special move in chess. Alright, so now it's time to teach you about en passant, the other special move that you can do in chess. So yeah, en passant works that en passant works that I move my pawn to e5 like so. Now black moves this pawn by 2 squares. So now if the pawn had moved here, and then I would have been able to capture it. But now that this pawn moved by 2 squares forward, I can do this special move called en passant. So how does it work? It works that so yeah, you can do this when a pawn moves by 2 squares on its first move, and there's your pawn next to that pawn like so. So you can move your pawn here and capture the pawn, even though this is the only move where you can capture a piece without going on the same square as that piece. So yeah, and this is how it looks like. Move your pawn here and make the move. So I just moved my pawn there and made what is called en passant. So yeah. So yeah, let me show you what I just did. I just did this, moving my pawn here, capturing the pawn from d6 to d5. So I can move the pawn here and capture this pawn right here. So yeah, the en passant can only be done exactly when, so yeah, the en passant can only be done if, wait, no, you're supposed to be moving by 2. By 2, I said! Come on! Okay, so yeah, you can also do the same on this other side. And by the way, the en passant can only be done as soon as the pawn moves 2 squares forward from its initial square. So for example, right now I can do the en passant like so, but if for example I choose to ignore the en passant and move the queen here, for example, now that black moves its next piece, as you can see, I can no longer make the en passant. So yeah, so now this pawn is blocked and I can no longer en passant with it. So yeah, that should do. So yeah, that should teach you about the en passant. So now let's move on. Now, moving on to the cases where a match can be draw. So yeah, a match cannot always end with the victory of either black or white. It can also end in a draw. So for this first example of a draw match, we're going to teach you about stalemate. So if white moves his queen to g6, like so, the match is draw by stalemate. So what does this mean? It means that black's king is not in check, so it can't be checkmate. However, black has no legal moves left because the knight is blocked by the 2 pawns, so it can't. So yeah, the knight is blocked by the 2 pawns, and the 2 pawns are blocked by the opponent pawns, and the king can't move in any of these squares because the queen is guarding all of these squares that the queen can go to. However, the queen is not in check, so in this case, a match can be considered draw by stalemate because black has no legal moves left, and the match is draw. So now another case of a draw match would be the 50 moves. Another case of a draw match would be the 50 move rule. So yeah, a match can become draw if you've gone. A match can be draw if you make 50 moves without capturing any pieces or moving any pawns. So yeah, a match can be like I said, a match can be declared draw when if you make 50 moves without capturing any pieces or moving any pawns. So yeah, we're just gonna move the most random stuff. So yeah, check does not count as a move that can reset the 50 moves. And there we go. So as you can see, we just did 50 moves without capturing any pieces or moving any pawns, where we don't even have pawns, and without checkmating the other king. So in this case, a match is draw because we've gone 50 moves without doing anything. So 50 moves without checkmating the opponent king or moving a pawn or capturing a piece. So in this case, a match is draw. Alright, so now another case where a match can be draw is if the two players do the same moves 3 times in a row. So let's say white moves his queen to f7 like so, and checks the black king. Black king has only one available move, which is moving to h8. The white queen decides to check the king again by moving in f8. The black king can only move to h7, and then white king checks again the king, and the king can only go to h8, and then again. So yeah, the players have repeated the same move twice now. Now a third. If the two players repeat to this same move a third time in a row, the match will be draw. So yeah, queen f7, king h8, queen h8. So yeah, and now that white is going to move his queen to f7, there. And there we go. It's a draw because the two players have repeated the same moves over and over again. They repeated the same move 3 times, which, so if this happens where the two players repeat the same moves 3 times in a row, the match will be declared draw. All right, now let's move on into the last case where a match can be draw. So now for the last case where a match can be draw is if the two players don't have enough pieces to checkmate the other. So for example, if white moves his queen to g4 and checks the king, the black king only has one legal move. It's to capture the white queen. And in this case, the match is draw due to insufficient material. So yeah, because kings can't check because kings can check because if the white king tries to check the black king, then he'll also put himself in check. So in this case, the match is draw because there's not enough pieces to checkmate the other. The two players only remain with their kings. So in this case, a match is draw due to insufficient pieces, and they can't, because the two players don't have enough pieces to checkmate the other. So in this case, the match is draw. Alright, so now that's everything you need to learn about chess. That's everything you need to learn in order to play chess. So now the last thing we're going to teach you is where the pieces need to be at the start of a match. So these are how the pieces are supposed to be, with the eight pawns in the second row, like so. And same for black. And then the two rooks in the corners. The two rooks in the corners, like so. And then the knights like this. And then the bishops like this. And then they get one queen and one king. And then white queen goes on the white square and black queen on the black square. And then there's the king right next to their queens. So the first move that basically everyone does in chess is move the pawn in front of the king by 2 squares, like so. So black does the same, and now watch us play in fast forward. So this is called a fork, where I'm attacking 2 pieces at once. So now, of course, black has to save the king. So now I can take his rook. It's a trick called the fork, when you attack 2 pieces at once. So now I can take the rook. Okay, I won. So yeah, as you can see, I won because the black king is, I checkmated the black king because the queen is attacking these squares and the rook is attacking these squares, and the king can't go here because the knight is guarding this. The knight is guarding this square, so it's checkmate, and I won. So yeah, so now that you know all the rules to chess, you should be ready to play your very first chess match. Anyways, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to our channel as well. Anyways, bye.